What became of the interactive movie? Well, as it turns out, it's going through something of a renaissance in the present day. What's really great about this resurgence of the genre is it's being driven in large part by British developers. After the modest success of Contradiction Spot the Liar in 2015, we've had a bunch of Brit attempts at the FMV game. Deveki Studios came along with The Infectious Madness of Dr. Decker and The Shapeshifting Detective in 2017 and 2018 respectively, using a lot of the same cast and really building a large cult following. We've also had the success of Sam Barlow's interactive films Her Story, Telling Lies, and most recently Immortality, which I thoroughly enjoyed and highly recommend, by the way.
Alright, so read for scene 25. So this is the key scene where Maria lays it on the line. If we keep it real, the audience won't realize they're being spoken to directly, so we keep the energy between the two girls.
Toss in smaller, lesser known titles like Late Shift and The Bunker, and suddenly it looks like the UK is keeping the genre going on its own. One of the more recent attempts at freshening up the FMV game is also one of the most creative and compelling. It's not for broadcast.
What does the future look like to you?
A bleak space where we've all been figuratively sodomized into submission.
Let's have a go with this whole democracy thing.
Okay.
And here we ballywell are.
Good stuff.
Brilliant!
Kath. Stay where you are, Kath. Jenny?
This is not Jenny's decision, Jenny. All yours.
It'll be alright, I'll talk to both.
Oh, good.
Not for Broadcast is a mix of game types that leans heavily on an FMV movie to hold the other pieces together. Like the ones that came before it, this interactive film has pretty limited interactivity in the sense that there is a story here, and if you keep pressing the right buttons at the right time, you're going to experience that story largely the same as anyone else, aside from multiple endings. The game casts you in the role of a TV producer working on the nightly news, right after a landslide election win for a too-good-to-be-true left-wing populist party promising all kinds of awesome stuff, but obviously hiding a ruthless authoritarian streak that gets revealed relatively quickly. From there you get to make some decisions on how you skew the coverage of both the government and their opponents, by selecting which ads to run at what point in the show, during news reports by selecting positive or negative imagery, and even during live interviews by choosing whether or not to censor speech the new bosses don't like.
Recently, you've been quite outspoken about the government.
Yeah, fuck the government. Fuck Advance. Fuck Peter Clement.
What is it that you object to so vehemently?
Well, you know, they stole from us. They're taking our money and spending it, man.
Redistributing it?
These choices don't affect much in how the film segments themselves play out, aside from some unique reaction clips from the hosts, but it does affect the outside world, because you see the interactive movie is only part of the game. There's a text-based choose-your-own-adventure happening around the broadcasts, in which you have to make decisions about your family and manage your finances. Do you side with the government for an easy life, even if it means betraying your loved ones? Do you risk the ire of your bosses and potential salary loss to stand up for what you believe in? The choices you make here, and in the movie segments, both feed into how well liked you are by the government, the network, and the corporations, which dictates how comfy your life is and whether or not you can afford to make certain decisions to help your family, and even though these are just walls of text, they're strangely compelling. That said, the spectre of modernity does cause some confusion by distorting the language all to hell. Look at this here. I spent ages thinking I'd misunderstood this scenario, because this screen seemed to be saying I was in a room with multiple people. I couldn't figure out what was happening because I thought I was just sitting down with my partner in the game. And then I realised that what they were doing was using gender-neutral language, and therefore plural language for my partner in the game, Sam. That's lovely and inclusive, but maybe we could just choose our avatar at the beginning to avoid all this bizarre language and confusion. There are frustrations in the movie segment too, as seemingly in an effort to inject more interactivity into the experience, you have quite a lot of busy work to be getting on with while the broadcast happens. As well as cutting between up to 4 different camera feeds every 5 to 10 seconds, making sure you're mostly focused on whoever's speaking, you also have to keep an eye on things like the interference in the waveform, requiring you to move the mouse around to change the amplitude and position to keep it in a moving boundary. You have to censor bad language using a delay track, quite aside from any selective censorship of opinions you engage in. You need to manage the power by keeping the essential stuff turned on in moments of emergency. And sometimes you even need to zap little creatures off the broadcast antenna outside so they don't bring down the whole thing. That's a small spoiler for a weird section in the middle. As these things ramp up in difficulty towards the end, it can make the experience feel more exhausting than enjoyable, and it actually distracts you from the quite interesting and surprisingly balanced story happening through the news broadcasts themselves. I think the devs know this, which is why after each nightly show, you get to look into the archive to watch it back at your leisure, or to watch the full content of all 4 feeds, so you can make sure you haven't missed anything in the story. But to be honest, the segments are reasonably long, and watching it all again is the last thing you want to do straight away after you finished it. With all that said, it's really the quality of the story and the acting that decide whether something like this works, and on that score this is a win. It's really refreshing to see writers tackling this kind of content, that being parodying the news and current affairs, without lazily taking sides in every conflict. Everyone gets lampooned here, not least of which the vultures in media making money off it all and desperately clawing for career advancement. There's a good amount of proper British humour too, with the jaded, cynical and tired on-location reporter in particular turning in a stellar performance that had me chuckling to myself a few times.
Christ. Oh, Jesus wept. Have you thought about quitting smoking?
Right. No, I'm fine now.
Okay.
What were we talking about?
The trapped scientists.
Oh, yeah, right.
The trapped scientists. Brilliant.
There's also a good sense of satisfaction when you manage to edit a decent show together, which means that while the game mechanics might be frustrating at times, they do work to draw you in a bit more than you might in, say, a traditional, less interactive FMV game. If that sounds good to you, give this a go. It's well worth your time, it's a refreshing and original idea, and it's supporting a booming UK games industry. What's not to love?